I had the pleasure recently of watching the acclaimed first season of True Detective. Now a decade since its release in 2014, my pattern for ignoring great shows until the noise is over might be a self-defense mechanism. With that said, there was no disappointment from this watch. This show really lived up to the hype, exploring the well-trodden detective mystery in a way that had me at the edge of my seat. I think a lot has already been said of this series since its premiere 10 years ago, but I thought I'd explore the religious, symbolic, and occult underpinnings of the work, and what the series is saying about the world. And so without further ado, let's dive right in. The first season of True Detective takes place in rural Louisiana, in towns that have long since lost their luster, remnants of civilization in decay.
Like somebody's memory of a town and the memory's fading. It's like there was never anything here but jungle.
It's in this location that we're introduced to our main duo, Rustin Cole and Marty Hart. Two somewhat polar opposites akin to the Sherlock and Dr. Watson variety. Marty is your regular American dad, the middle-class son from a two-parent household.
My mother, Donna Reed type, packed lunches, bedtime stories.
Currently in one himself with two daughters and a wife that he habitually betrays to satisfy his ego and lower impulses.
You gotta decompress before you can go being a family man.
His better half comes in the form of Rust, the detached pessimist with a keen knack for criminal behavior from his past as an undercover narcotics agent.
But he's already running with it. He's got a real mind for it.
Having been reassigned to homicide after a botched sting. It's these two characters who stumble upon a seemingly ritualistic sacrifice.
The occult, ritual, murder.
And must come to terms with the reality that underlies their previous notions about society.
Never heard any shit like this before. She had antlers.
What they uncover ultimately changes their lives forever, stuck in an endless loop until they find their culprit.
Sentience just cycling through our lives like carts on a track.
I think for myself, understanding that there's already been a decade of discourse regarding the show, I want to make sure that I don't retread any old ground, and so for this analysis, I want to use the recurring theme that I believe encapsulates the show, and that theme comes in the form of the phrase, use, abuse, and discard. The writer for the show, Nick Pizzolatto, inspired by the likes of Cormac McCarthy, H.P. Lovecraft, and Robert Chambers, wears his influences on his sleeve. The mystery is partly inspired by the real-life Hosanna Church scandal, also taking place in rural Louisiana, where it's believed to have affected 24 children in its 5 years of existence. One member of the church described his experience as turning from Jesus to the devil. He claimed that they've been holding satanic rituals for years that involved animal sacrifice.
Y'all think maybe this have something to do with those cats?
What cats?
Two of them. One, and a couple of weeks later, another. Somebody caught them up, turned the insides out and nailed them to the front door twice.
Authorities said witnesses have described the use of robes, pentagrams on the church floor, defilement of dogs, and the sacrifice of cats. The alleged victims, suspected to number up to 24, included children ranging from infants to young teens, some of them offspring of the accused, which sounds kind of familiar.
He had lots of children, all types.
The villain of the story bears many likenesses to Judge Holden of Blood Meridian, such as his charisma and proclivity in the defiling of innocence of children, his talent and accents, a supernatural aura, and the guise of fulfilling some occult mission, resemble the baby-faced giant of a judge who waxes philosophically, turning molten earth to gunpowder with claims that he cannot be killed.
He never sleeps. He says that he will never die. He dances in light and in shadow, and he is a great favorite. He never sleeps, the judge. He is dancing. He says that he will never die.
Pizzolatto explores a similar philosophy to McCarthy through his mouthpiece Rust Cole. His long-winded poetic observations of the decay around him can come off a little on the nose and somewhat contrived in a modern setting.
Giant gutter in outer space.
But Marty's frequent retorts serve as a good foil to keep the show from ever feeling too much like a freshman philosophy course.
Begging you to shut the up.
The pessimism of Rust is characterized by his belief in the futility of existence.
I think the honorable thing for our species to do is deny our programming. Stop reproducing. Walk hand in hand into extinction. One last midnight brothers and sisters opting out of a raw deal.
His belief that humanity has evolved past its point of utility and should just go quietly into that good night. And yet in his contradiction, he has volunteered his efforts toward law enforcement almost as though it were penance for his mindset.
For him to wake up and encounter the world and do this job is a form of self-crucifixion because he's so
He understands the contradiction and acknowledges some internal wiring that forces him to not only live, but to exact justice upon transgressors whose actions, in his worldview, have no meaning.
The real answer is that it's obviously my programming, and I lack the constitution for suicide.
As a matter of fact, the actions that are taken by those transgressors are working to the benefit of his philosophy, and as a homicide detective, he's actively curbing the act that most clearly defiles human sanctity, which is murder.
I don't use $10 words as much as you, but for a guy who sees no point in existence, you sure fret about it an awful lot. And you still sound panicked.
The self-awareness of his hypocrisy is what makes Russ's character arc really captivating. From his ideas that bad men are needed to catch bad men, it feels like some sort of struggle of gazing at the abyss for too long, making monsters of us.
What's the point of getting out of bed in the morning?
I tell myself I bear witness.
The engaging with principalities of darkness often means them leaving their mark on our souls, leading us to embody our shadow self. And yet his conclusion is rather redemptive and points to a near evangelist reading of the events that preceded the finale. As shoehorned as it might feel, one can only wonder if Rust was actually jealous of the congregation that he so loathingly analyzed and abased.
Just observation and deduction. See a propensity for obesity, poverty, a yen for fairy tales. Folks putting what few bucks they do have into little wicker baskets being passed around. I think it's safe to say that nobody here is going to be splitting the atom, Marty.
Having been emptied of hope until his near-death experience.
I knew my daughter waited for me there. So clear.
Marty's grappling with the reality that Rust presents is one of the key pieces in understanding the show, not only serving as the everyman foil, but highlighting the symmetrical foundation of both characters. His reaction to Rust's philosophy is one of disgust.
That sounds god awful, Rust.
As expected by the quote-unquote average American, he cannot bring himself to confront or to argue a position. Marty is not moved by entertaining any sort of deep philosophical treatise, as far as he knows. He just follows what came before him.
You know, throughout history, I bet every old man probably said the same thing. And old men die, and the world keeps spinning.
Follows his natural human inclinations and the behaviors and expectations of the society around him.
I wouldn't go around spouting that shit if I was you. People around here don't think that way. I don't think.
All of his beliefs, however, are the product of ages of philosophical and theological grooming. All of that history just to get that moment in the car ride.
Nobody was going to let me make a TV series that was just about two men riding around talking. So I put a murder in there.
Where the ideologies of men long since perished, from Renaissance humanists to French revolutionaries and the penning of the Declaration of Independence, all leading to the faux religious society that's been emptied of its Sunday mass, filling their day with vulgar talk, promiscuity, and distraction.
She stuck her finger up my... That's she something. You're Christian, yeah?
The show is also in this way pointing a judgmental finger back at its audience, who are so captivated by tales of gruesome death, despite the show not transcribing it to image.
No! Yeah!
It's the mystery that holds our attention, and the violence that satiates our curiosity. We are, in the same way, trapped in the loop of bearing witness to our own degeneracy.
You'll do this again. Time is a flat circle.
I said, Nietzsche, shut the f***.
We bear witness every time that we click to watch the next episode.
You watch all that?
Yeah. I had to.
Rust and Marty, though very different at face value, are much more alike than it seems.
They are, despite their sins, incorruptible.
The programming that Rust refers to his want for justice, value, and meaning is also the same programming that's instilled in Marty, who represents the baser instincts of humanity: domination, procreation, and pleasure-seeking. and their names give as much indication. Rust Cole is a descriptor of his apathetic and cold, almost elemental approach to life.
That's why he's an oddball with the other police officers, because his code of honor has nothing to do with their cultural context.
Whereas Marty Hart could be indicative of someone who follows his passions. As such, it's Marty's philosophy that's most damaging to society.
You know, one of the interesting dichotomies between the two men is that the one man has literally nothing governing him, and he keeps himself rigidly self-governed. And the one that has a family and should be more governed uses that as an excuse to go ungoverned.
His actions throughout the series ripple through his surroundings, accomplishing the same goals as the villains of the show, which is ruining the children.
In our lives, good things. People give you rules. Rules describe the shape of things.
All because he cannot come to terms with himself.
Marty's single big problem was that he never really knew himself. So he never really knew what to want.
This explains the frequent repetition of the phrase, "It was right under our nose."
The solution to my whole life was right under my nose.
His infidelity to his wife is a nod to the broken family structure, often referred to by religious leaders as a key to the destruction of society, the very same conclusion espoused by Rust.
You got some self-loathing to do this morning, that's fine.
The difference between the two is Rust embodies the higher virtues of his programming, ideals bred from reason and wisdom, while Marty embodies passion and pride. This lower nature has to be curbed to protect and maintain society.
You mow my lawn?
Just what you think I'd be doing over here, you're not around, Marty. What's our problem?
To allow for civilization to flourish. And yet we are, statistically at least, attached to self-destructive behaviors.
Now you're just throwing up stats.
The scene most representative of this reality is where Marty's jealous passion and wounded pride lead him to head to the home of his mistress after just having finished dancing with his wife.
Oh, nothing.
To confront her infidelity.
Get off! Yeah, that's right. Get off! You tell me or I'll have some 9-4.
The cognitive dissonance in this scene would make the devil blush. But the key to the scene isn't Marty barging in the house, but right before that moment, his car runs over a child's bicycle. And to capture it more accurately, the nose of his vehicle ends up right atop the bike, right under its nose, you could say. His actions as an adulterer are mirrored to those of the occult elite. His actions are ruining the children.
So you're telling me the world isn't getting worse? I've seen kids today, all in black, wearing makeup, shit on their faces. Everything's sex.
It's why there's this emphasis on his family life, the seeping of ills of his trade into the minds of his children, the neglect of both his family and especially his eldest daughter, her lost innocence, and her future self-destructive behavior are mirrored to the reality that we've come to accept in our mission to follow our passions.
She's just trying to get attention, but my true failure was inattention. I understand that now.
And yet, as contradictory as always, it's Rust who warns Marty of the outcomes of his behavior, who shows genuine care for Marty's family and their future, the same way he continues to care about the case and the victims of the cult.
I'm the person least in need of counseling in this entire state.
Marty's actions follow the same outcomes as the cult, and the same pessimism of Rust. Use, abuse, and discard.
In dry cleaning for 20 years. And chemicals. That's what's wrong with my nails.
And ultimately, this reflects itself in his wife and his children.
Get the f*** out of here!
Now, am I likening adultery, or its more modern term, cheating, to occult ritual sacrifice? Absolutely not. But the moral parallels here are worth considering. The consequences of moral decay, visually established by the setting, is spiritually embodied by the destruction of innocence. Your moral framework needs to be able to withstand lower temptations, the base nature that calls us to give in to it. Rust, who prescribes to no deity, still understands that these lower passions will be his destruction, and the only instance that we see him have a moment of weakness somewhat pointedly serves as the final nail in the coffin to a family's destruction.
It's coming from my files, Marty.
He in this scene is used, abused, and discarded as a consequence to the moral failure of society embodied by Marty's family. just like his stint as an undercover narcotics agent, just like his career as an accomplished homicide detective, just like his friendship to the one person who actually cared about him.
Nobody without me. There is no you.
The destruction of innocence is no laughing matter. The defilement of children has generational impact.
Please. I don't want to get arrested. Just kid.
In the same way, the Tuttle family has had their claws in the rustic landscape of Louisiana since its inception.
My family's been here a long, long time.
Their purpose of breaking the home, the family structure, has manifested itself through the ash-colored, faded plains of modernity.
I got a bad taste in my mouth out here. Aluminum. Ash.
The literal sacrifice is representative of its more socially acceptable form in choosing to feed your passions, to chase desire in lieu of moral uprightness. The flat circle of time is not only reliving every moment of your life, but in the patterns and decisions you choose to inhabit daily. Will you learn from your mistakes or give in to your lower self? Again and again and again. Morality is not a plateau that you can choose to rest at. You're either getting better or worse. It's a Sisyphean effort to continue to ascend or descend. But there's a reason why Rust, who embodies these higher principles, who follows the higher nature of his programming, is the only one that can make progress in the show. And also, like his allusion to another redemptive figure in history, you can't be saved if you don't want the same for others.
We left something undone. We gotta fix it. Man remembers his debts.
Life is a series of decisions, consequences of said decisions, and living with or improving upon said decisions. You can either refuse to learn who you are and forego becoming self-actualized.
Russ knew exactly who he was. And there was no talking him out of it.
I know who I am. After all these years, there's a victory in that.
Thereby committing yourself to continue to following the same proclivities and patterns you've always inhabited, or you can choose to follow that road less traveled, the one that distinguishes you as a human being, the one that lets you see the light at the end of the tunnel.
You watch all that?
As always, thank you for watching. If you stay tuned in and enjoyed the video essay, please like, subscribe, and share. It helps to know your thoughts, so let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to support the channel more directly, feel free to head to my Patreon linked in the description. Special shout out as always to the ones who support the channel and help keep the lights on. I'll see y'all in the next one. Thank you for watching.